Hi guys, I'm Erin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about The Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson, which is the fourth book in the Stormlight Archive series. I overall quite enjoyed this book. It's not my favorite of the series, but I thought it was really solid, really good. It does a good job, I think, of laying a lot of the setup and groundwork for the fifth book and kind of laying the setup, some of the plot lines for a big finale of this first Stormlight arc. With the fifth book, since books 1 through 5 is one arc, and then 6 through 10 will be a second arc, so I think it did a really good job with that. And while this was not a 5-star read for me, this was a 4-star read for me. I think a lot of the storylines and kind of things they've been hinted on that we will, I assume, see in the fifth book is really setting up the fifth book to be a 5-star expectation for me. So I'm very much looking forward to the fifth one when it comes out in 3 years, I think, is when it's supposed to come out. We'll see. This one also did a lot to ramp up the Cosmere connections, which I admittedly wasn't actually expecting this one to. I don't really know when I expected them to kind of get ramped up, because there have been a little bit so far with some ties to Warbreaker, and I kind of assumed there would be more, and I don't really know when I expected them, but I definitely didn't get this one thinking, man, this one I think is when he's really going to ramp those up, but he definitely did, which that was one of the struggles I had with this book, actually, and kind of something that kept it from 5 stars is it's been 6+ years since I've read any non-Stormlight Cosmere books. 6 years ago, I think, is when I finished Era 2, and it's been longer since I'd read Era 1 and Elantris and Warbreaker, so I struggled with some of the Cosmere connections in this book, and so I don't know how much blame I lay at this book or on myself. I kind of had two different expectations for Cosmere connections. I thought there'd be one category of connections which are kind of more Easter egg connections, things that weren't as important and integral for understanding the plot, and I thought those would be kind of more specific, detailed ones that if I hadn't read the other Cosmere books in a while, or for someone who picked up Stormlight as their first Sanderson, because Way of Kings was my first Sanderson book. For those people, it wouldn't take away from the plot if they didn't get them. And then the second category of Cosmere connections I expected were kind of what we saw with the Warbreaker connections, where they were more integral to the plot than a true Easter egg. I think a little bit more, not necessarily 100% centric to the plot, but they were kind of more general references to someone like me who remembers the gist of the other Cosmere books, if not a lot of the details. I did pick up and understand what they reference to. But this one got more specific, and there's one specific Cosmere connection that ended up being a reveal as someone's identity in one of the plots, and it was just lost on me because I just didn't remember the connection at all. And so I think some of this is on me for having bad expectations of how the Cosmere would be connected, because after reading this book and seeing the connections and kind of looking up the ones that I could tell were connections that I couldn't remember, and what the Cosmere has been explained, they were these connections happen exactly how I should have expected based on what the Cosmere is. It's supposed to be this intertwined verse, not just these all happen to take place in the same verse. They're supposed to be intertwined worlds, and so I should have expected them to be more like they were in Rhythm of War, and I just didn't. So that is a little on me. I will definitely be doing a Cosmere reread between now and the fifth book, which I'm looking forward to because I haven't reread any of the other Cosmere books. I've reread the first 2 Stormlight books before reading Oathbringer and this one, but I haven't reread any of the others, and I'm looking forward to doing a reread just to revisit those. And also, I think that'll help with my 5-star expectations of book 5, because all these connections won't be as lost, and I'll have a more enjoyable time with those storylines. So I've been looking forward to that. So I'm going to talk about most of my thoughts on this book, organized by whose point of view and whose storyline it was, because that's just kind of how I think of the book. I know some people talk about the books in terms of part 1, part 2, part 3, whatever, but I think about it more as the full storylines more than the parts. So I'll start with my least favorite and then favorite of the characters and storylines. And so my least favorite is Venli / the Ashonai Venli flashbacks, and my favorite is Adolin. So starting with flashbacks, this is the first book in the series, excluding Way of Kings, because I obviously didn't know any of the characters picking that one up, but of the other 3, this is the one where the flashback point of view characters didn't entice me to pick it up. obviously I wanted to pick it up because I like the series, but with Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, who the flashbacks were about, was also like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to read Shallan and Dalinar's flashbacks, but reading Ashoni and Venlai's flashbacks just wasn't a draw for me. I've never super been interested in the Singer storylines, which also is why Venlai is my least favorite of the current storylines. And I did enjoy the flashbacks more than expected, but they're definitely my least favorite of the four. And then Venlai's point of view, I had pretty low expectations for, again, because I just wasn't as interested in reading her point of view. And I was surprised that I did enjoy it quite a bit. But again, still my least favorite, just because I liked everyone else's better. I am glad that Venlai has become our Singer point of view character as opposed to Ashoni, because I never really liked Ashoni. She was just, like, I didn't dislike her. She was just fine. I just never felt attached to her. So I do like Venlai as a point of view character better than Ashoni. So that is a point in her favor. And her storyline was interesting. Just least favorite of all of them because I just like the others a lot better. And that's, again, just because the Singers have just never really been part of the story that I really wanted points of view for whatever reason. The lore around the Singers and the Feuds and the Regals and kind of their hierarchy and how they work with all their history has kind of confused me more than any of the other parts of the lore. That's the one I found myself having to look up a couple times while reading it, and so because of that, it's just not the point of view I enjoy the most. Adolin is my favorite point of view, and so I went into this book with Shallan as my favorite character. She was my favorite from Way of Kings. She remained my favorite through Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. I really liked her initially because I kind of liked this scholarly character. It was someone who I related to a lot when I read Way of Kings as a nerdy high schooler, and I continuing just really enjoyed her. And so because of this book, she's been replaced as my favorite character by Adolin. I loved Adolin's arc in this book so much, and a lot of it has to do with his relationship and actions with others in this book. And there's three main examples of this. One is his interactions with Kaladin at the beginning of the book. I think in this book you really start seeing them having become more friends. It was always in the previous book, there was always this dynamic of Adolin, calling Kaladin Bridge Boy and not actually being like super mean and like stepping all over him, but definitely not friends. At least I did not interpret them as particularly friends. But in this book, I really started to see that they had started to grow a friendship in the 1 year gap between Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, and the way Adolin helps Kaladin in the first parts when Kaladin's kind of going through some of his depression, I just really enjoyed. And so then the second relationship in this book with Adolin that I really contributes to my new love of Adolin is Adolin and Shallan. I've always been a big fan of them together as a relationship. I thought they were cute together. I thought they were good for each other. They were good together. They were a good match in my opinion. And this one, really the end of Oathbringer into this one really reinforces that for me. I think the way Adolin handles and approaches Shallan and her personalities is just, it's the best match she could have had, and I really liked reading about it. I think they're really well matched together, and I look forward to seeing them together in later books. And then the big one of the three that really changed my mind is Adolin's interactions with his Shardblade's dead Spren, Maya. I'm not going to go into too many details because I don't want this to be a totally spoilery review, but his reactions with Maya were so heartwarming. That arc with her and him was incredible. I really liked it. I think it just really shows this nice, caring side of Adolin a lot. In previous books, he kind of comes off as the Prince Charming who loves fashion, and that's all true, but this shows kind of his deeper, softer side, which I really loved. And I think also just beyond that, in this book, he's really coming into his own person, in that he's not being bogged down as much, I think, by what Dalinar wants him to be, or how Dalinar wants him to react, and really is more expressing himself. And there's several moments in this book you can see that. So Adolin has become my new favorite character. So the next character I will going to be talking about is Shallan and her points of views. This was my least favorite book to read about Shallan, and a lot of that is because Shallan's chapters are no longer Shallon. They're Radiant and Veil with some Shallon. And I just never really got totally into that trio's dynamic. I love Shallon, and whenever it's her chapters, I just want to read about Shallon. I like Veil more than Radiant because when I liked Veil when she was first introduced, and I liked seeing her kind of be her persona to sneak in. But I never really got Radiant's role in their dynamic. That's just something that didn't quite sink in with me. So I didn't love that trio's dynamic, and so her chapters just weren't as good to me because I just wanted to read more Shallon. That being said, the way Shallon's arc ends in this book was very good, and it makes me really excited to see her chapters more in book 5. She's definitely going through a lot mentally in this book, kind of with her past and having to come to terms with some things in her past that she hasn't come to terms with, things she hasn't told people, some of the things that caused Veil and Radiant to kind of, or mostly Veil to appear as a personality. It was her coping mechanism, I think. And so how that arc with her dealing with her past ended, I did think was really good, and it made me more excited to read more of Shallon's chapters in book 5. So the fourth main storyline in my mind is Navani's storyline, and I quite enjoyed the storyline despite not really loving Navani as a character. I never really had strong feelings on her either way, never really disliked her, never really liked her. And this book didn't change that. She's still just kind of neutral, kind of there in my mind. But I did like her storyline a lot in this book. One thing that I've seen is kind of probably the most common comment across everything, YouTube and Goodreads reviews that I've seen for this book, is talking about how scientific Navani's chapters are, and that's kind of a hit or miss for people, and that is totally fair. Her chapters can get kind of scientific, so if you're interested in kind of the science of Stormlight with the Fabrials, pretty much the Fabrials and Gemstones, then I think you'll quite enjoy Navani's chapters. The fourth main storyline in my mind in this book is Navani's, and I quite enjoyed her storyline. I don't really have strong feelings on Navani as a character, and this book didn't change that. I don't really dislike her. I don't really like her. She's just kind of there. Kind of feel very neutral about her. But I did like her storyline in this book. One of the most common comments I've seen about her storyline across all the reviews I've seen on YouTube and Goodreads is how scientific her chapters are, and it's kind of hit or miss for people. And that is totally fair. She definitely can get kind of scientific in her chapters. That's mostly the point of her storyline, and I did enjoy them. I studied engineering in college. That's my day job, so I found it interesting most of the time. Again, there were some days where, again, my day job is engineering, and sometimes at the end of a long day, I just wanted to relax more, and so I wasn't as interested in the if I hit sciencey chapters on those days. But I did mostly enjoy them. But what I really liked about her chapters, but so if you're interested in kind of the science side of Stormlight with Fabrials and Gemstones, you'd probably really like these. But what I liked about her chapters the most is her dynamic with our new antagonist, Ravoniel, one of the singers. It was really interesting. Ravoniel, I think, also is my favorite antagonist I read in this series so far. Her kind of thoughts and actions on how she wants this war between the two people to end and to accomplish is really interesting, and has some interesting plot developments because of that. And I found Ravoniel as a character to be very compelling, and so I really like their dynamic. They kind of had this, we're enemies and hate each other, especially since there was a power imbalance because of some plot reasons where one of them had power over the other that they were fighting against, but also the scientific sides of their minds really wanted to work together and be colleagues. In that sense, they both learned from each other. They discovered some things in this book. There were some scientific discoveries talked about, and so just reading that dynamic from Navani's point of view of Navani's kind of always wanted to be the scholar, but hasn't really been a scholar. She's just facilitated scholars, and so in this book she really gets to be a scholar, and that is something that she's talks about kind of towards the end, is she's finally a scholar. And so the part of her that wants to like learn these new things from Navani to help her own research, at war with I shouldn't be in cahoots with Ruboniel because we are enemies. And I just thought that was really interesting. And it had that arc had a very unexpected and good ending. So yeah, those were the 4 main arcs in this series. Yasna and Dalinar are together for most of this book, and we don't see a ton from their point of view. I wanted to see Yasna more now that she's the queen. I really liked what I saw. Her and Wit have a very entertaining dynamic, and I really wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of Yasna as queen, but we just didn't see their storyline as much as the others. I'm less disappointed in not seeing Dalinar. I know some people wanted to see more of him. I like Dalinar. I think I would have enjoyed seeing more of him, but of those two in their storyline, I wanted to see more of Yasna more. Also, some standout side characters in this book were Dabbit and Rlain, both Bridge 4. I just really they kind of came to the forefront as Bridge 4 members. Previous books focused on other Bridge 4 members more. And this book, we really got to see Dabbit and Rlain a lot, and I really enjoyed it. I thought they were both fun characters, and I'm also glad to have seen different Bridge 4 members kind of come to the front as far as secondary to our main characters, so we kind of get to know some of the lesser known characters more. So I really like that. One character I wish we'd seen more in the interludes than we did. I believe we had one interlude related to her, but I wish we had more interludes, was Rysn. After reading Dawnshard, before I read this one, I really love Rysn and want to see a lot more of her. I would be surprised if she ever became a main point of view character, though who knows how the second arc of this series is going to go. But I hope she becomes a mainstay interlude character, because I thought she was really interesting, and I would love to read more from her. I will also say, Lift, I have conflicting feelings on Lift, in that I didn't love her as a main point of view character in Edgedancer. Her voice is just a little too much for me, but I had enjoyed seeing her through other point of views, and that continued in this one. I like Lift when I see her through other characters' point of views a lot, and I do think she's maturing a little bit, so that does give me more hope for the second half of this series, because I know she's going to be one of the main point of views later, so I do have more hope now that by the time she becomes a main point of view character, she'll have matured more into a voice that I enjoy more than when we got a lot of her in Edgedancer. Last comment on this is going to be kind of my thoughts on the plot pacing with the parts. The other reason that this kind of ended up as a 4-star, in addition to the Cosmere connections that kind of fell flat for me in this one, was there was definitely a slog in part 2 and a little bit of part 3 for this, for me. That took me a while to get through. Probably took me as long to get through that chunk as the rest of the book. So it was just, the plot just moved slower, and it just wasn't pulled in during that part, in part 2 and a little bit part 3. But that being said, part 1 was solid, part 4 was solid, and then part 5 was a straight banger. It was so good. It was a classic Sanderlanche. It was so fast-paced, an explosive ending to this book. It almost made me forget that slog, and I ended it, I was like, dang, yeah. And I was like, oh, but that other part that took me so long to get through, though. So part 5 was awesome. There was a lot of things happening in it that were amazing with some of the characters. There's also some things in it that were kind of sad, that really hit an emotional punch. So part 5 was amazing. It was probably my favorite part. If I had to rank the parts 1 through 5, would be part 5 as a favorite. Great ending, really definitely hyped me up for the next one. So those are my overall thoughts on Rhythm of War. As I said, I gave this book a 4-star. I don't know if I liked it better than Oathbringer, as those would be the 2 4-stars, so I'm not sure how I'd rank the series. I think I would say Words of Radiance number 1, then Way of Kings, and then I think this one over Oathbringer, but it's close. There's things I liked different things in both of them, so it's hard to rank those against each other for me. So yeah, I'm looking forward to book 5 and my impending Cosmere reread. So I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.